Amnesty International has appealed to the government of Eswatini to halt forced evictions. In a report released today, Amnesty International says the government's evictions have left hundreds homeless and plunged them further into poverty. Amnesty says that although the evictions involved a long legal process, they were carried out without adequate notice, compensation and genuine consultation. The organization has released details of evictions in 2 areas in the country that resulted in more than 200 people, mostly subsistence farmers, losing their homes. Amnesty International has also decried the country's land governance system, stating that the way it has been set up has resulted in Swazi people not enjoying any degree of security and tenure, making them vulnerable to forced evictions. To talk more on Amnesty International's report on land evictions in Eswatini, we're now joined by Shireen Mukadam from Amnesty International. Shireen, thank you so much for joining us on The Globe. Now, were the evictions carried out within the provisions of Swati law?
Good evening. The evictions were carried out in violation not only of Swaziland's national laws, but also regional and international human rights standards. Section 19, subsection 2 of the Swazi constitution protects against arbitrary deprivation of property without adequate compensation. However, this report has found that the evictions in 2 areas, in Nokwane and the Malkans, took place in violation of not only the national law, but regional as well as international human rights standards. The reason why this is an issue for Amnesty International is because international human rights law is unequivocal. The protection from forced evictions is available to all, even to those without legally recognized rights to the houses or lands that they occupy. And as you rightly pointed out, what the evictions have shown us is that it is actually a symptom of a deeper underlying problem. At the heart of the issue is the complex land governance system in Swaziland, which is inextricably linked to the country's history and political economy. At the heart of the problem is the lack of security of tenure for people, which leaves them vulnerable to be forcibly evicted.
Now, Shireen, how were these evictions carried out?
In the report which we released today, the report is called "They Don't See Us as People, Security of Tenure and Forced Evictions in Eswatini." We look at evictions which have taken place in 2 areas of the country, in the Nokwane between September and October 2014. And this is a case where it was a government-led development initiative to build the Royal Science and Technology Park. And as a result of that development, Amnesty International interviewed 15 out of 19 people who were forcibly evicted along with their families. A total of 180 people were forcibly evicted from Nokwane. Although the government did take steps to meet with the families, Amnesty International believes that the meetings did not meet the threshold of genuine consultation. The families were not given adequate notice ahead of the evictions, and as a result, a lot of their belongings got destroyed during the demolitions. In addition, none of the families that Amnesty International interviewed received any kind of adequate alternative accommodation or compensation following their forced evictions, and this resulted in homelessness as well as a wide range of interrelated human rights violations.
Has the government of Eswatini seen and responded to the report?
Amnesty International has been engaging with the government of Eswatini since the beginning of our research, which commenced in March 2017. We have shared the findings of our report ahead of publication, as is our standard procedure, to the relevant ministries, the Ministry of Information, Communications and Technology, as well as the Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy, ahead of publication to allow them the chance to respond and to clarify any questions that we had. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy did not respond to Amnesty International. We did, however, receive a response from the Ministry of Information, Communications and Technology, which we have included in our report, which is published today. We also today held meetings with various government ministries to officially hand over the final report. We met this evening with the Secretary to Cabinet, as well as other ministries. This report is the beginning of a long-term campaign that Amnesty International will be rolling out in Eswatini to halt forced evictions in the country over the next 2 years.
Now, Shireen, in terms of what the report states, what's the way forward?
Amnesty International has made a number of recommendations to the government of Eswatini. Amnesty International is calling on the Prime Minister to declare a nationwide moratorium on all evictions until adequate legal and procedural safeguards are in place to ensure that evictions comply with international and regional human rights standards. In addition, Amnesty International is calling on the Prime Minister to immediately provide reparations for forcibly evicted families in the Malkans and Nukwane cases. The reparations should include adequate alternative housing, rehabilitation, compensation for all losses, and guarantees of non-repetition. As I mentioned, one of the underlying factors causing the forced evictions is the complex land governance system, which is opaque. And Amnesty International is calling on the Attorney General to immediately after national elections begin the process of drafting legislation that explicitly prohibits forced evictions in all circumstances and sets out safeguards that must be followed before any eviction can be carried out. And linked to this process, the Attorney General should also expedite the finalization of the land policy and the land bill to ensure that they are compatible with international and regional human rights obligations arising from the right to adequate housing.
Are there any time frames with regards to the recommendations made by this report?
Amnesty International is calling on the Prime Minister to immediately declare a nationwide moratorium on all evictions, and this should include a public announcement and immediate measures that the government should take to ensure that those under threat of eviction are protected.
Shireen, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That is Amnesty International's Shireen Mukadam joining us on the line. Time now for a quick